Arrest her now. She's got weapons in that barn. Patricia, our HOA president, screamed into 911 while pointing at my wife in our barn on our ranch. This woman had stalked us for weeks, even crawled through our yard at midnight with a measuring tape. But Patricia didn't know one tiny detail about Elena. When those 5 police cars roared up our driveway, what happened next made Patricia's jaw drop, and 30,000 live stream viewers lose their minds. The next hour turned Patricia from HOA queen to the internet's biggest joke. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. When Elena and I first laid eyes on the 5-acre ranch, we knew we'd found our paradise. The property stretched out before us like a promise of peace and quiet, with rolling hills and mature oak trees that had probably been standing there since before my grandparents were born. The crown jewel was the barn, a massive red structure sitting 200 meters from the main house, perfect for my woodworking dreams. Elena had walked through it with this mysterious smile, running her hands along the sturdy beams and saying, "This is perfect for my needs." I'd assumed she meant storage, or maybe a home gym. Boy, was I wrong about that. We spent our first 2 days in pure bliss, setting up the workshop, organizing tools, and just breathing in the country air without a care in the world. The first 2 days were everything we'd hoped for. I spent hours setting up my workshop in the barn, organizing my tools on the walls, and testing the acoustics with my table saw. The sound barely reached the house, let alone any neighbors. Elena would bring me coffee in the afternoons, and we'd sit on hay bales watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. She seemed more relaxed than I'd seen her in years, though she kept checking her phone and taking calls in private. "Work stuff," she'd say with a wave of her hand. "Nothing important." I should have paid more attention to how she always stepped outside for those calls, or how she'd started waking up at 4:30 in the morning for her exercise routine. But I was too happy, too content in our new life to notice the signs. Day 3 started like a sledgehammer to the skull. 6 in the morning, I was dead asleep, probably drooling on my pillow and dreaming about refinishing a vintage dresser when the pounding started. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that makes you think either the house is on fire or the FBI is about to break down your door. I stumbled out of bed in my pajamas, you know, the embarrassing ones with little hammers and saws printed all over them, and yanked open the door to find a woman who looked like she'd been awake since 3, fueled by pure determination and probably way too much coffee. She stood there in a power suit that looked wildly out of place on a ranch at dawn, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association." She said it like I should curtsy or something. Behind her, I could see a measuring tape hanging from her pocket and what looked like a professional camera around her neck. "I'm here about your barn." I blinked at her, still trying to process why anyone was at my door at this ungodly hour. "I'm sorry, what HOA? This is a ranch. The nearest house is mine, and it's 200 meters away." Patricia's smile grew wider, but somehow colder. "Oh, you must not have read the fine print when you purchased. The Riverside Estates HOA has jurisdiction over all structures within 5 miles of member properties. And your barn, well..." She flipped through pages on her clipboard with theatrical flair. "It violates at least 23 separate codes." She pushed past me before I could respond, marching toward the barn like she owned the place. I followed in my ridiculous pajamas, trying to form coherent thoughts while she rattled off violations. The door color is non-compliant. The roof angle exceeds acceptable parameters. The window placement violates Section 12, subsection C of our architectural guidelines. I watched in growing disbelief as she pulled out her measuring tape and started actually measuring my barn door. She took photos from every angle, muttering things like flagrant disregard and complete non-compliance. At one point, she got on her hands and knees to measure the gap between the barn door and the ground. "This gap is 3/4 of an inch too large," she announced triumphantly. "That's a potential security hazard." That's when Elena appeared fresh from the shower, with her dark hair still dripping. She leaned against the doorframe of our house, coffee mug in hand, watching Patricia's performance with an expression I couldn't quite read. It was somewhere between amused and calculating. Patricia was in the middle of photographing what she called an illegally placed doorknob when she spotted Elena. Something strange happened then. Patricia's whole body went rigid. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Her hand trembled as she raised it to point at my wife, and the pen she'd been holding clattered to the ground. She bent quickly to retrieve it, mumbling something under her breath that sounded like "can't be" or "not here." When Patricia straightened up, She was trying to restore that cold smile, but her eyes kept darting back to Elena with something that looked like recognition mixed with fear. I'll be sending you a formal notice of violations, she said, her voice suddenly less certain. You have 72 hours to respond. And then she practically ran back to her car, clipboard clutched to her chest like armor. Elena took a slow sip of her coffee and said, "Interesting neighbor." She had that mysterious smile again, the one that meant she knew something I didn't. As Patricia's car disappeared down our driveway, leaving a dust cloud in her wake, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. But why did Patricia suddenly go pale when she saw my wife? Comment what you think. The email started exactly 3 hours after Patricia's visit. The first one arrived while I was trying to salvage my morning with a strong cup of coffee and some scrambled eggs. The subject line read, "Urgent violation notice number 1, unauthorized acoustic disturbances." I nearly choked on my toast. Apparently, Patricia had heard suspicious sawing sounds at 6:03 that morning. The funny thing, I hadn't even been in the barn yet. The next email came at 9:15 documenting unauthorized smoke emissions from our property. I looked out the window at the wisps of steam rising from my coffee mug on the porch railing. By 2:47 that afternoon, I had 17 emails, each more ridiculous than the last. My personal favorite accused me of parking our truck at a non-regulation 3-degree angle that disrupts the visual harmony of the landscape. I started keeping a folder on my laptop labeled Patricia's Greatest Hits, thinking maybe I'd need it for evidence someday. Elena found me hunched over the computer that evening, reading about our apparent violation of grass height uniformity standards. She looked over my shoulder and laughed, actually laughed, which surprised me because she'd been tense all day. "She's certainly thorough," Elena said, pointing at an email with 37 attached photos of our barn from different angles. "Look at the timestamp on these. She was out there at 3 in the morning. That's when something caught my eye in one of the photos. A reflection in our barn window showed Patricia wasn't alone during her late-night photography session. There was someone else there holding what looked like professional surveying equipment. Who takes a friend on a 3 a.m. stalking mission? I wondered aloud. Elena studied the photo more carefully, then smiled. Someone who wants witnesses, or someone who thinks they're building a legal case. The next morning, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Armed with binoculars and a cup of coffee, I positioned myself at our kitchen window with a clear view of Patricia's house. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 5:30, Patricia emerged in full tactical gear. I'm talking black clothing, a utility vest with multiple pockets, and what looked like night vision goggles hanging around her neck. She set up a tripod on her deck and mounted what I can only describe as a camera lens that belonged on a nature documentary about lions in Africa. The thing was massive, and it was pointed directly at our barn. I grabbed my phone and started recording, zooming in, as she adjusted the angle and started snapping photos. She stayed there for 45 minutes, only going inside when Elena emerged for her morning jog. "Honey, you need to see this," I called to Elena. She appeared beside me, already dressed for one of her mysterious early morning barn visits. When she saw what Patricia was doing, she didn't seem surprised. "Let her watch," Elena said calmly. "In fact, document everything she does. Times, dates, photos, videos. Trust me on this." There was something in her voice that made me look at her more carefully. My wife, who usually got flustered when the grocery store was out of her favorite yogurt, was completely unfazed by having a neighbor spy on us with equipment that probably cost more than our truck. "Aren't you concerned?" I asked. "She's literally stalking us." Elena smiled and kissed my cheek. "Trust me, Marcus. I know how to handle people like Patricia. Just keep documenting everything. It'll be important later." That night, things escalated to a whole new level of crazy. Our new motion sensor lights, which Elena had insisted we install the day we moved in, started going off around 2 in the morning. I groaned and rolled over, figuring it was just a deer or maybe a raccoon. But Elena was already up, standing at the window with her phone in hand. "Recording?" I asked sleepily. She nodded. I dragged myself out of bed to look, and there was Patricia dressed in all black again, army crawling across our lawn with a tape measure in her mouth. I'm not making this up. She was literally commando crawling toward our barn, like some kind of suburban ninja. She'd make it a few feet, then pop up to measure something, take notes on a small pad, then drop back down to crawl some more. At one point, she got tangled in our garden hose and spent 5 minutes trying to free herself without standing up. The security footage the next morning was comedy gold. Patricia had spent 47 minutes measuring every external dimension of our barn, leaving little pieces of tape with cryptic markings all over the walls. But here's where she messed up. She dropped something, right by our barn door, clear as day. In the morning light was an HOA letterhead with handwritten notes. I picked it up with a tissue, careful not to smudge any fingerprints, Elena's idea, and read Patricia's scrawled notes. Most of it was measurements and violation codes, but one line made my blood run cold. Previous owners, barn incident, 2019, check county records. Below that she'd written E. Thompson with 3 question marks and circled it multiple times. There was another note, new police chief, same name, investigate further. Elena had started her new morning routine of heading to the barn at 5 a.m. sharp. She said it was for meditation and exercise, but I noticed she always carried a large duffel bag and locked the barn door behind her. Patricia noticed too. By the 4th day, I caught Patricia on our security cameras literally camping out in the bushes between our properties, wrapped in a camouflage blanket with her giant camera. When Elena jogged past on her way to the barn, Patricia nearly fell out of the bush trying to get photos. Elena, cool as a cucumber, just waved and called out, "Morning, Patricia, beautiful day for bird watching, isn't it?" The look of shock on Patricia's face when she realized she'd been spotted was priceless. But Patricia recovered quickly, and the smile that spread across her face as she watched Elena enter the barn was genuinely unsettling. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Even from the security footage with no audio, I could see her gesturing excitedly, pointing at the barn and then at some papers in her hand. Whatever she thought she'd discovered, it had her practically dancing with joy. She kept saying something over and over. From her lip movements it looked like, "I knew it," or "got her." When she hung up, she actually did a little fist pump before gathering her surveillance equipment and scurrying back to her house. I had a sinking feeling our peaceful ranch life was about to get a lot more complicated. What did Patricia just discover that made her this confident? Tell me your wildest guess. Patricia's investigation into my wife went into overdrive after that morning. I know because her nephew Todd started showing up everywhere we went. Todd was about 25 with the investigative skills of a golden retriever and about as subtle. I first noticed him at the hardware store pretending to be fascinated by paint samples while obviously taking photos of me buying lumber. Then he was at the coffee shop hiding behind a newspaper with eye holes cut out like something from a cartoon. When I walked past his table, he lowered the newspaper so fast he knocked over his coffee. Elena found it hilarious. "That boy's been following me all week," she told me over dinner. "Yesterday he tried to tail me in a bright yellow Camaro because that's not conspicuous at all." We were laughing about it, but part of me was getting seriously concerned about how far Patricia was willing to take this bizarre vendetta against us. According to the gossip mill, also known as the elderly couple who ran the local grocery store, Patricia had been telling anyone who'd listen about the suspicious activities at our barn. She had hired Todd to be her private investigator, which explained his terrible attempts at surveillance. The poor kid had apparently submitted a report to his aunt that included such damning evidence as subject Elena purchased 12 bottles of water and protein bars, and multiple vehicles visited the property between 5 and 6 a.m. Patricia had taken these mundane observations and spun them into a wild conspiracy theory. The vehicles clearly criminal associates, the water and protein bars, obviously supplies for some kind of illegal operation. The early morning timing, when law-abiding citizens would be asleep and unable to witness their crimes. The grocery store owner shook his head as he told me this. "That woman's got too much time on her hands," he said. Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting at her house, which I only know about because our other neighbor, an elderly man who lived a mile away, felt bad and gave us a heads up. "That Patricia's got about 10 people convinced you're running some kind of criminal enterprise out of your barn," he told me, shaking his head. "Showed them pictures of people in dark clothes going in and out. Got them all worked up about protecting the children." The man looked embarrassed. I told her she was being ridiculous, but she said I was naive, and that's what criminals count on. Good people being too trusting. Elena had been listening from the kitchen, and she came out with fresh cookies for our neighbor. "Thank you for letting us know," she said sweetly. "We appreciate neighbors who think for themselves." The old man left with a box of cookies and a confused expression, probably wondering why such nice people were being targeted. The situation reached peak absurdity when Patricia created a social media group called Concerned Citizens Watch. I found out because Todd accidentally sent me a friend request, and I could see the group on his profile. Patricia had posted buttons of blurry photos with captions like, "Suspicious activity at all hours," and "Unknown individuals in military-style clothing," and my personal favorite, "Protect our children from whatever's happening in that barn." The group grew to 50 members overnight, mostly people from the extended HOA community who didn't even live near us. Patricia was painting herself as some kind of suburban hero, bravely standing up to the dangerous criminals who had invaded their peaceful community. The comments ranged from supportive to completely unhinged, with people suggesting everything from drugs to arms dealing to human trafficking. One person even suggested we were training attack dogs, which made Elena laugh so hard she nearly spilled her tea. Elena found the whole thing more amusing than alarming, which should have been my first real clue that something was different about my wife. While I was pacing around the kitchen ranting about lawsuits and restraining orders, she was calmly making tea and scrolling through the group on her laptop. "Look at this one," she said, showing me a comment suggesting we were training attack dogs in the barn. "That's creative. I hadn't heard that theory yet." Her complete lack of concern was baffling. "Elena, these people think we're criminals. Patricia's convincing our neighbors we're dangerous." She closed the laptop and took my hands. "Marcus, do you trust me?" Of course I did. "Then trust me when I say Patricia is about to learn a very important lesson about making assumptions." She had that mysterious smile again, the one that had been appearing more frequently lately. By the end of the week, Patricia had assembled what she called her HOA security force, 10 brave neighbors willing to conduct a citizen's inspection of our property. She had printed official-looking documents from some website complete with fake legal jargon about their right to inspect for community safety. She equipped everyone with phones to live stream the event, because apparently suburban justice needed to be broadcast for maximum impact. I watched from our window as she held a strategy meeting in her driveway, using a whiteboard to diagram approach routes to our barn like she was planning a military operation. She'd even made matching t-shirts that said HOA Security in big letters. It would have been funny if it wasn't so disturbing. She assigned roles to everyone, someone to film, someone to document, someone to call 911 if needed. She actually used the term breach team at one point. The night before the planned confrontation, Patricia sent out a message to her group that said, "Tomorrow at dawn, we expose the truth and save our community. Bring your phones, bring your courage, and prepare to witness justice in action." The post got hundreds of reactions and dozens of comments cheering her on. People were comparing her to famous whistleblowers and calling her a hero. One person even suggested contacting the media to cover the event. Elena read the message over my shoulder and did something unexpected. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh or an angry laugh, but a genuine delighted laugh. "Oh, this is perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect." Then she made herself a cup of chamomile tea and went to bed early, leaving me staring at the computer screen, wondering what my wife knew that I didn't. The next morning, I woke to find Elena already dressed and drinking coffee on the porch, watching the sunrise with perfect calm. "Aren't you going to the barn?" I asked, knowing her routine. "Oh, I think it's better if I'm here for this," she said, that mysterious smile playing on her lips again. In the distance, I could already see activity at Patricia's house. People gathering, cars arriving, the HOA security force preparing for their big moment. Elena took another sip of coffee and reached for my hand. "Whatever happens," she said, "just remember, I've got this handled." The sirens started getting louder around 5:45. Elena took one last sip of her coffee, leaned over and whispered something in my ear that made me smile despite the chaos about to unfold. What did Elena just tell me that made me smile? Wrong answers only in the comments. The morning of Patricia's planned invasion started with almost military precision. I watched from our bedroom window as her HOA security force assembled in her driveway at exactly 5:30 a.m. Patricia stood before them like a general addressing troops, wearing a tactical vest with HOA security emblazoned across the front in reflective letters that probably violated several actual laws about impersonating authority figures. She'd really gone all out, clipboard in one hand, walkie-talkie in the other, and what looked like a badge of some sort hanging around her neck. The 10 neighbors she'd recruited looked less certain, shifting nervously in their matching t-shirts as Patricia gave what I can only describe as a motivational speech. Arms waving, finger pointing toward our property, occasional fist pumps, the whole 9 yards. Several people had their phones out already, streaming to social media, broadcasting this suburban assault to anyone bored enough to watch. "Today we save our community," Patricia's voice carried across the distance between our properties. Today we expose whatever illegal operation is happening in that barn. Today we stand up for safety, for our children, for justice. Are you with me?" The group gave a half-hearted cheer that suggested at least some of them were having second thoughts about this whole thing. But Patricia was beyond stopping now. She'd worked herself into a righteous fury, convinced she was about to be the hero of her own story. The group began their march toward our property, phones held high, live streaming their approach. I could see the viewer counts on their screens climbing, 500, 1,000, 2,000. Comments were pouring in, cheering them on. "Get 'em, Karen power, expose the truth." The internet mob was hungry for drama, and Patricia was about to serve them a feast they didn't expect. Some of them were even using selfie sticks to get better angles of their march across the field. Elena stood beside me at the window, sipping her coffee with perfect calm. She'd dressed down for the occasion. Old t-shirt, ripped jeans, hair in a messy bun. To anyone watching, she looked like she'd just rolled out of bed. "Shouldn't you be at the barn?" I asked, knowing she usually left by 5. "Oh, I think it's better if I'm here for this," she said with a smile that made me realize my wife had been playing chess while Patricia was playing checkers. We watched the group reach our property line. Patricia made a big show of opening our gate, announcing loudly for the cameras, "We are entering the property for an official HOA safety inspection, as is our right under community bylaws." The fact that we weren't even part of her HOA didn't seem to matter. She'd convinced herself and her followers that she had the authority, and that was enough for her. "Document everything," she called out. "Multiple angles. This is history in the making." The march to the barn was almost comical. Patricia led the charge, her security force spread out behind her in what I guess was supposed to be an intimidating formation. One woman was narrating everything like a nature documentary. "We're approaching the suspect structure now. You can feel the tension in the air. The barn looms before us, red and ominous in the morning light." Another man kept zooming his camera in and out dramatically, trying to make our red barn look as menacing as possible. They reached the barn doors, and Patricia raised her fist, signaling everyone to stop. The live stream viewers were going wild, 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, and climbing. This was better than reality TV. Patricia took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and began pounding on the barn door with both fists. The sound echoed across our property, probably scaring every bird within a mile radius. "Open up, official HOA inspection." Her voice cracked slightly on official, betraying her nervousness beneath the bravado. "We know what you're doing in there. This is your last chance to come clean." And the pounding continued for a solid 30 seconds, while her crew filmed from every angle. Someone in the back whispered, "What if nobody's there?" But Patricia silenced them with a glare. "They're in there," she hissed. "I saw movement earlier." She pounded again, harder this time. "We have the legal right to inspect this property. Open this door immediately." That's when Elena decided to make her entrance. She strolled past me, coffee mug still in hand, and opened our front door with deliberate calm. The walk from our house to the barn had never looked longer, as 10 cameras swiveled to track her movement. She moved with unhurried grace, like someone taking a pleasant morning stroll, rather than walking into a confrontation. The live stream cameras followed her every step, the comment sections exploding with speculation. "Good morning, Patricia. Neighbors." Elena's voice was steady, almost amused. "How can I help you?" She stood before them in her casual clothes, looking for all the world like someone who had been interrupted during a lazy Saturday morning. Patricia's face flushed red. "We're here for an official HOA inspection. We have evidence of illegal activities taking place in this structure." She waved her stack of papers like a weapon. "Evidence?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "What kind of evidence?" Patricia pulled out her phone, showing photos to the cameras. Dark vehicles arriving at suspicious hours. People in uniform-like clothing. Equipment being moved in and out. You're running some kind of operation here, and we demand to know what it is. The cameras eagerly zoomed in on the photos, which showed exactly what Patricia described. Vehicles and people in what could be uniforms. Of course, without context, they looked suspicious. Patricia had made sure of that with her selective photography and dramatic descriptions. Elena took a slow sip of her coffee, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. Behind Patricia, her security force was starting to look uncertain. The barn door was right there, closed but not locked. Through the high windows, equipment was visible, what looked like uniforms hanging on hooks, some kind of communication devices on a table, official-looking documents posted on a board. Patricia saw it too and practically vibrated with excitement. "There, look at that, they're impersonating law enforcement. That's a federal crime." The camera zoomed in eagerly, the viewer count now exceeding 10,000. This was it, Patricia's moment of triumph. She turned to the cameras with a triumphant smile. You heard it here first, folks. We've uncovered a major criminal operation in our community. Is that so? Elena's voice was dangerously calm. She set her coffee mug on a fence post and pulled out her phone. Well, if you truly believe a crime is being committed, I suppose we should call the real authorities. Patricia's eyes lit up. This was exactly what she'd wanted. Yes, call them, let's see how smug you are when actual police arrive. But Elena wasn't dialing, she was texting. Oh, I'm not calling them, she said with a smile that made my heart skip. They'll be here soon enough. Patricia, riding high on adrenaline and internet fame, grabbed her own phone. Fine, I'll call them myself. She dialed 911 with theatrical flair, making sure all the cameras could see. The woman operating the selfie stick moved in closer to capture every word. Yes, emergency. We have armed individuals impersonating police officers at this address. They have weapons and official-looking equipment. Send everyone you have. She gave our address, her voice getting higher and more excited with each word. They're dangerous. We have them cornered in a barn. Hurry. She hung up and turned to her audience, both in person and online. Justice is coming, she announced. In just a few minutes, you'll all witness these criminals being arrested. We did it. We saved our community. The live stream viewers were going absolutely wild. Comments scrolled by faster than anyone could read them. The counter showed 15,000 viewers and climbing. Patricia stood tall, basking in her moment of glory, completely unaware that she'd just orchestrated her own downfall. In the distance, sirens began to wail, multiple sirens, getting closer fast. Patricia screamed, "Arrest her now!" as the first police car turned into our driveway. The lead officer stepped out of his vehicle, took one look at the scene before him, and said just 2 words that changed everything. What 2 words could possibly flip this entire situation? Drop your guess below. The police cars rolled up our driveway like a parade, 5 of them in total lights, flashing sirens, wailing, until the very last moment. Officers emerged in full uniform, hands on their duty belts, assessing the scene with professional caution. Patricia was practically dancing with excitement, pointing frantically at Elena while shouting over the dying sirens. There! That's her! She's the one impersonating an officer. Check the barn. It's full of police equipment. The lead officer, a tall man with sergeant stripes on his sleeve, approached slowly. His eyes swept over the group of neighbors, in their matching HOA security shirts, the multiple phones streaming everything live. Patricia with her tactical vest and fake badge, and finally landed on Elena, who was still standing calmly by the barn with her arms crossed. I held my breath, watching from the porch as the scene unfolded. The other neighbors had gone quiet, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Even the woman who had been narrating everything like a documentary had fallen silent. The sergeant stopped mid-stride. His entire body language changed in an instant, from cautious approach to sudden recognition. Behind him, the other officers were getting out of their vehicles, and I watched as each one had the same reaction. A double take, a moment of confusion. Then sudden stiffening of posture. The sergeant's hand moved from his duty belt to smooth down his uniform shirt, and when he spoke, those 2 words hit like a thunderbolt. Chief Thompson. The question hung in the air for a heartbeat before every single officer straightened to attention. In perfect synchronization, they raised their hands in salute. The sergeant continued, his voice now formal and respectful. Good morning, Chief. Sorry about the delay in response time. We came as quickly as we could. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop if not for the faint buzzing of phones still recording, still streaming to thousands of viewers who were witnessing this incredible reversal. Patricia's face was a masterpiece of changing emotions. I watched her expression morph from triumphant glee to confusion, then to slowly dawning comprehension, and finally to absolute bone-deep horror. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound coming out. The clipboard slipped from her nerveless fingers and clattered on the ground. Behind her, the HOA security force was having a collective meltdown. Phones that had been held high to capture the arrest were now dropping to sides as people tried to process what they'd just witnessed. The live stream comments were exploding so fast the screen was just a blur of text. Wait, what? Oh no, did he just call her chief? Karen done messed up. Plot twist of the century. The viewer count hit 25,000 and kept climbing. Someone dropped their phone entirely, and it landed screen up, still streaming the sky while chaos erupted around it. I could see Patricia's knees actually buckle slightly before she caught herself on Todd, who looked like he might faint. Elena stepped forward, and despite her casual clothes, there was an unmistakable authority in her bearing now. "Good morning, Sergeant Miller, everyone." Her voice carried clearly across the space and through all those phone microphones to the watching thousands. "I apologize for the confusion. As you can see, we have a bit of a situation here." She gestured to the barn behind her. "This structure has been serving as our satellite meeting point for early shift briefings. It helps me coordinate with officers who live in this part of the county without requiring them to drive 30 minutes to the main station before patrol." The officers nodded, clearly familiar with the arrangement. One of them added helpfully, "It's been a real time saver, Chief. Appreciate you setting it up." Another officer chimed in, "Best idea you've had since you took over. My commute's cut in half." They were being helpful, but every word was another nail in Patricia's coffin. The live stream viewers were getting an education in dramatic irony. Patricia found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak. No, you can't be." Elena turned to her with an expression of mild concern. "Mrs. Henderson, are you all right? You look a bit pale." The irony of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. Here was Patricia dressed up like she was playing cop, standing in front of actual police officers and their chief. Her fake badge looked especially ridiculous now. "I'm the HOA president," Patricia sputtered, as if that title meant anything in this moment. You should have told us. This is deceptive. You've been hiding your identity." Elena's eyebrow rose slightly. "I've been a resident for less than a week." "Was I supposed to go door to door announcing my job title? I moved here hoping for some peace and privacy." She paused, then added with devastating calm, "Though it seems privacy is in short supply with you installing surveillance equipment aimed at my property." The officer's expressions hardened at that. Sergeant Miller pulled out a notepad, suddenly very interested in Patricia's activities. The sergeant stepped forward, his expression stern. "Ma'am, did you call in a false emergency report?" Patricia's face went even paler, if that was possible. No, I thought, the equipment, the uniforms." She was backing away slowly, but there was nowhere to go. She was surrounded by her own recruited witnesses, all still filming. "So, you called 911 claiming armed criminals were impersonating police officers," the sergeant continued, "when in fact you were observing actual police officers conducting legitimate police business. You do understand that filing a false report is a crime, and that stalking and harassing a law enforcement official is also a serious offense." The weight of her situation was finally crashing down on Patricia. Her eyes darted wildly, looking for an escape route or a friendly face, but found neither. Even Todd had stepped away from her, probably rethinking his career as a private investigator. The HOA security force was dissolving before our eyes, people removing their matching shirts and trying to blend into the background. Patricia tried to run then. She spun on her heel, took 2 steps, and promptly tripped over the "No Trespassing" sign she herself had placed there earlier as a prop for her live stream. She went down hard, her phone flying from her hand, but somehow still streaming as it landed face up on the grass. The image it captured was priceless. Patricia sprawled on the ground, her HOA security vest riding up her fake badge tangled in her hair, while in the background uniformed police officers stood at attention, saluting their chief. The live stream viewer count showed 30,000 and climbing. Comments were scrolling by so fast they were unreadable, but I caught glimpses. "Instant karma. Called the cops on the cops." Karen played herself. "This is better than Netflix." Someone in the crowd shouted, "She called the cops on the police chief." And nervous laughter rippled through the group. The sound seemed to break the spell, and suddenly everyone was talking at once, phones swinging wildly, as people tried to capture every angle of this disaster. Elena walked over to where Patricia was struggling to get up and offered her a hand. Patricia slapped it away, scrambling to her feet on her own. "This isn't over," she screeched. "I know my rights. I'm going to sue. You entrapped me." "This is entrapment." One of the officers, a younger woman who had been trying not to laugh, spoke up. "Ma'am, entrapment is when law enforcement induces you to commit a crime you wouldn't have otherwise committed. Chief Thompson didn't make you stalk her, install illegal surveillance equipment, trespass on her property, or file a false police report. You did all that on your own." The officer paused, then added, "And you broadcasted it, live, to thousands of witnesses." Another officer nodded. "Actually make that tens of thousands. This is trending already." Patricia's mouth opened and closed boundlessly as the full implications hit her. She had documented her own crimes, streamed them live, and created thousands of witnesses against herself. That's when Patricia's phone, still streaming from the ground, captured something the viewers noticed before anyone else at the scene. In Patricia's dramatic fall, the contents of her tactical vest pockets had spilled out. Among the HOA citations and measuring tapes were some interesting items: a set of lockpicks, a device that looked suspiciously like a listening bug, and what appeared to be copied pages from some kind of law enforcement database. The chat exploded with people screenshotting the evidence, typing "caught" over and over. Patricia noticed the commotion and looked down, her face going from pale to green as she realized what had spilled out. She tried to kick dirt over the items, but it was too late. Dozens of cameras had already captured everything, and the screenshots were spreading across the internet like wildfire. Elena noticed the items and her expression hardened. "Sergeant Miller," she said quietly, "I think we need to have a more serious conversation with Mrs. Henderson." The sergeant was already moving his hand, reaching for his handcuffs. Patricia's still streaming phone caught something viewers noticed first. But wait, what did 25,000 viewers spot in the live stream that Patricia didn't notice? Type "caught" if you see it. The viewers had caught everything, and I mean everything. Within seconds of Patricia's fall, screenshots were circulating across social media platforms faster than wildfire in a drought. The lockpicks were bad enough, but the listening device was damning. The copied database pages, though partially visible, clearly showed Elena's name at the top, with "confidential, law enforcement only" stamped across them. Patricia had somehow accessed restricted information, and she'd been careless enough to carry the evidence with her. The live stream chat was going insane, with people tagging news outlets, sending screenshots to local reporters, and creating memes in real time. Someone had already made a GIF of Patricia tripping over the sign with "instant karma" flashing across it. The internet worked fast, and Patricia was about to learn just how fast. I watched from the porch as the situation spiraled completely out of Patricia's control. Sergeant Miller bent down to examine the items without touching them, treating them like evidence at a crime scene, which I realized this had become. "Chief Thompson, these appear to be..." He trailed off, looking up at Elena with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Mrs. Henderson, where did you obtain these documents?" Patricia, still on the ground, tried to cover the scattered items with her hands, like a child caught with stolen cookies. "Those aren't mine. Someone planted them. This is a setup." But her own live stream betrayed her completely. One of her followers had been recording from a different angle, capturing Patricia earlier that morning, showing off the lockpicks to her security team, bragging about being prepared for any situation. That video was already being shared hundreds of times, tagged with evidence and Patricia confession. The woman with the selfie stick had accidentally captured Patricia tucking the listening device into her vest pocket. Every moment of her preparation for this confrontation had been documented by her own team. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stand up slowly and keep your hands where I can see them," Sergeant Miller said, his friendly demeanor now completely professional. Patricia scrambled to her feet, her face cycling through emotions like a broken slot machine. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I was protecting the community." The sergeant pulled out his handcuffs with practiced ease. "Patricia Henderson, you're under arrest for filing a false emergency report, criminal trespassing, stalking, and possession of illegal surveillance equipment. We'll add more charges after we investigate how you obtained classified law enforcement documents." The click of the handcuffs was audible through every phone microphone, broadcasted to what was now 50,000 viewers. The sound seemed to echo across the property, final and damning. Patricia's own phone, still streaming from the grass, captured the perfect angle of her being handcuffed by the very police she'd called. "Wait!" Patricia shouted as the reality hit her like a freight train. "I know people. I have connections in the police department. Ask Detective Johnson. He'll vouch for me." One of the officers snorted. "You mean retired Detective Johnson, who's been gone for 3 years?" Patricia's face crumpled like paper. "But he said he told me he could get information." Elena stepped forward, then her expression a mixture of pity and disgust. "Let me guess. Someone claiming to be Detective Johnson sold you my information, took your money, and gave you insider access to police files." Patricia's silence was answer enough. She'd been scammed while trying to run her own scam, and now she was facing real charges with real consequences. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The woman who had spent weeks trying to prove Elena was a fake had been buying information from an actual fake. The assembled HOA security force was slowly backing away, like they were trying to escape a contagious disease, trying to distance themselves from their former leader. Some were deleting their live streams. Others were turning their cameras on Patricia to capture her arrest. The woman who'd been narrating everything like a documentary was now telling viewers, "I had no idea she was doing anything illegal. We thought this was just a normal HOA inspection." Sure, because normal HOA inspections always involve tactical vests and lockpicks. Within minutes, hashtags were trending with screenshots of Patricia's evidence and endless memes of her fall. The internet had found its new favorite villain, and Patricia was about to become more famous than she'd ever imagined, just not in the way she'd hoped. People were already designing t-shirts with her shocked face, and the caption, "I called the cops on the cops." As Patricia was led to the police car still protesting her innocence to her dwindling audience, one of the officers recognized her from another angle entirely. "Sergeant, isn't this the woman who's called in 17 false reports this year? The one who claimed her neighbor was running a meth lab because she smelled his barbecue?" The sergeant checked his phone, pulling up records from the department database. "You're right. There's actually an existing warrant for her arrest from last month. She failed to appear for a court date about her previous false reports." The live stream chat exploded again with this new information. Patricia wasn't just a Karen having a bad day. She was a serial false reporter who'd been terrorizing neighbors for years. People started sharing their own stories about Patricia in the comments, creating a digital avalanche of evidence against her. Someone found old social media posts where Patricia had bragged about cleaning up the neighborhood by reporting suspicious activities that turned out to be kids playing basketball or families having cookouts. Patricia was placed in the back of the patrol car, her HOA security vest riding up awkwardly with her hands cuffed behind her back. Her phone had been collected as evidence, but dozens of other cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of her downfall. The crowd that had come to support her was now documenting her demise, and the internet was having a field day with the footage. Memes were already circulating. Patricia's mugshot photoshopped onto movie posters, her fall turned into a dance remix, her "I'm the HOA president" becoming the new catchphrase for entitled behavior. The local news van that pulled up just as the police car was leaving only added to the circus atmosphere. The reporter looked like Christmas had come early as she interviewed witnesses and gathered footage. The judge would later laugh out loud when presented with Patricia's case file, but not for the reason you'd think. What creative punishment did the judge give Patricia? Your suggestions might be better than reality. 2 weeks later, I sat in the courtroom trying not to laugh as the judge reviewed Patricia's case. The man actually had to pause several times to compose himself, especially when the prosecutor played clips from the live stream. "Mrs. Henderson," the judge finally said, removing his glasses to pinpoint her with a stare that could freeze lava. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen someone document their own crimes so thoroughly. You've saved the state considerable time and resources." Patricia in her orange jumpsuit looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The judge continued, 500 hours of community service, specifically maintaining the very barn you harassed. You'll also produce weekly apology videos to be posted on the same social media accounts you used to spread false accusations. And you'll attend a special course I'm creating just for you, Anger Management for Homeowner Association Overreach, which you'll take alongside your mandatory therapy sessions. The best part came when we returned home to find Patricia already there with her probation officer holding a paint roller and wearing a community service vest. I stepped out with a beer and settled into a lawn chair. "You missed a spot," I called out helpfully as Patricia struggled with the barn's high corners. "Actually, several spots. Maybe if you used that measuring tape you're so fond of, you'd get better coverage." Elena, now comfortable being known as Chief Thompson in the neighborhood, brought Patricia water. "Stay hydrated, Patricia. You've got 498 more hours to go." Patricia muttered something under her breath and promptly painted her own face while trying to reach a difficult angle. It became a running theme. Every single day, Patricia managed to get paint somewhere on herself. The barn was eventually designated the Patricia Memorial Community Policing Center, complete with a plaque featuring her now famous mugshot and the caption, "A reminder to mind your own business, established 2024. The morning briefings continued, but now with fresh paint and a story that every new officer heard on their first day. Patricia served every hour of her sentence, creating some unintentionally hilarious apology videos that became their own internet sensation. "I'm sorry for assuming my neighbors were criminals based on no evidence," she'd say while scrubbing bird droppings off the barn roof. "Today's lesson is about the importance of minding your own business," she'd announce while repainting sections she'd measured incorrectly. "So, What happened to Patricia after her 500 hours?